First of all, good afternoon or good morning, depends on what time frame you're on. My name is Philemon. I'm the president of a grassroots civic NGO from Romania. And I'm also in the DCN team as a leader of the community in my country. And I use this time by staying at home and talking to interesting people about what's going on outside and what will happen after we start going out again and rejoining our usual lives. This event is co-organized by the Digital Communication Network Southeast Europe Hub and World Learning, and is part of a series of events. If you haven't joined some other webinars which were organized weekly during the last, I think, 4 weeks now, you can also join the next ones, which are very interesting. We are trying to cope with the lack of information or overflow of information during these complicated times. And we have seminars organized on the various subjects. What we want to discuss today, and we want to also underline the fact that this is part of DCNC's Ideas in Action Digital Engagement, a series of virtual events launched in the context of this coronavirus 19. And the opinions which will be posted here through our own minds do not necessarily represent the official opinion of the organizers. DCNC is supported by the US Department of State Office of Citizens Exchanges. And DCNC Southeast Europe is a consortium of Aristotle University, the Digital Communication Network, nonprofits, public and private organizations and companies involved of fields of digital communication, social impact and innovation. So now that I'm done with the introduction, I would like to get to my guests, which are two people I look very up to because I admire them a lot for the work they've done and they are continuously doing. The first one is Sandor, who is co-founder and president of K-Monitor, a nonprofit public funds watchdog based in Budapest. And he's now also working from home. And it's easier to catch people like this now because they're stuck at home. Otherwise, they will be flying probably somewhere in the world. And the next one is Franak, which is for those of you who joined here previously, our events, you probably know him. He's the director of the training unit of Digital Communication Network, and he's a digital media strategist for the US Agency for Global Media. And he's my go-to guy when I want to talk about social media and dictatorship, because I have the experience of a dictatorship. Now he is living the experience of dictatorship. But what we hear, or at least what I hear the most around me these days and around the internet, is that the world is changing and that the world will never be the same. As a civic activist, this is frightening because the situation we are in is like the worst case scenario for a civic activist. You're not allowed to protest, you're not allowed to go outside. The parliament is not meeting. The state has more powers than we would like it to have. So it's a bit of an overflow of anxiety right now for us in the civic sector, but we're doing our best. And this is a sacrifice we all have to do in order to make people safe during these troubled times. But let's see how's the situation in the countries where my two friends are coming from. So I will start with Sandor. Tell us, Sandor, how's the situation in Hungary?
Hello and welcome to everyone, and also thank you, Diana, very much for the invitation. I really appreciate the work of Forum Apulum, so it's always a pleasure to join your events. So I give you a very brief insight of what's going on in Hungary, both in terms of how the Hungarian government is reacting on the crisis and how it is, let's say, exploiting the crisis for its on political reasons, and also a bit about the communication background of it. So just to understand the context, when this crisis arrived to Hungary, or when it became reality and people really started to talk about it as something that is present in our life and might have and will have serious influence on our life, the government was just working according to its regular propaganda communication plan. Our government, in terms of communication, works like a big for-profit company that does extensive outreach to its customers, meaning that they know day by day what they're going to communicate, what videos they use, what messages they have, what expressions they want to make people use and the media use. So everything is very well planned. So they already had their plans for the spring, which was, surprise, surprise, about migrants endangering the country, George Soros and his network endangering the country, their network helping prisoners in lawsuits in the Strasbourg courts, and planning a national consultation, one thing that the government regularly does to attract people's attention and communicate or get, let's say, an extra legitimacy for actions they will do. So when you could already hear the news that something will come and the whole crisis will hit Europe and Hungary as well, the government first started to play down the crisis, saying that yeah, it's there, but it's equally or even less a big problem than migration. Some government close folks in the media even played it really down, that it's a hysteria, it's a lie that is gonna hit us, it's a conspiracy. And they kept focusing on migration and the regular issues. And you could see that they had a real problem in how they can tackle this situation, where they are used to set the agenda, and then an agenda came up without their control. And when they first realized, in the first Hungarian person who got infected was actually named and reported on, the government tried to find a connection to migration because it was an Iranian medical student. So of course the communication went on that, yeah, you see, this is again proving our fears that migration also spreads diseases, and it's migrants who brought in and foreigners who brought in this illness. But of course, a few days later, as the whole virus spread and people got more and more anxious, they started to absolutely don't care about this background, whether who is in charge of spreading the virus. Obviously, many people understood that this is just a fake story, and they started to care whether kids should go to school. And the government first was really against closing schools, and again tried to convince people that it would just hit the economy, it would be a problem not to allow kids go to school. But in the background, the political parties, and you have to understand that normally our government and the opposition parties have a very, very bad relationship. They don't really communicate with each other, started to negotiate on what actually do with this situation. And while in the morning, and that was a very symbolic thing for how Orban lost for a second control over communications, said in his regular Friday morning radio interview that it makes no sense to close down schools. They need to operate. In the evening, in late night, the special announcement, he said that schools will be closed down from Monday. So everyone was surprised that in the morning you say one thing and in the evening it's another thing. And even, one of their big propaganda stations condemned the opposition for asking the closure of schools. And really in just an hour, Orban was the one who announced the closure of schools. So this is, was the learning phase of the government to how to deal with this situation. On March 11th, the state of danger was declared in Hungary, which was not, in terms of limiting personal freedoms, not really a big thing. There is no curfew in Hungary. There are, of course, limitations, but they're not that strict as they were, let's say, in Italy or some countries. But borders were closed, universities were closed, there were limitations for shop openings and so on. But to maintain the state of danger, the parliament needed, according to the constitution, to extend this. And the government was, of course, negotiating with the opposition, but then had a draft bill which had two provisions which were really problematic. One was about the not setting a deadline for the state of danger, allowing the government to rule by decrees, because this state of danger situation and decree that was released that allowed the government to rule by decree, to override certain laws. And allow very swift, quick decision making. So this would be extended for a practically undefined time. It could be withdrawn by the parliament, but of course in the parliament the government has a two-thirds majority of the government party. So practically it was indefinite time. And the other thing was concerning the criminal legislation, criminal code, which was amended so that media could be, or spreading fake news or spreading information that can be misleading, can be punished in a more strict way, which of course is people feared as a limitation to free media. Not only because we know what this government did in terms of limiting rights and dealing with the media for 10 years, but also because government-closed journalists started to say that certain journalists should be locked down these days because they endanger efficient handling of the crisis. So what happened at the end, that the opposition needed to help the government in getting this through the parliament, because the very short deadline, and they needed 4/5 of votes, which then the opposition is part of. And it seemed that they're gonna find a compromise, and for a long time, which everybody was surprised, there is negotiations going on between opposition and government. There is kind of feeling of national unity, that together we will master this crisis. And then, out of the blue, finally, Orban in the parliament announced that either you accept the draft bill as it is, or we're gonna just solve the problem without you, completely turning the way how they communicated with the government. And behind of the whole thing is, of course, that Orban realized that he can only survive this crisis, both the economic consequences of the crisis and the pandemic as well, if he has a real enemy besides the crisis, because the crisis, the pandemic will end, of course, hopefully very soon, and then he will remain with the economic crisis and the consequences, and this is then much harder to target. The opposition is, of course, easy to target, so they needed someone to blame for. So from this moment on, the opposition was used as a scapegoat for blocking and making it unable to adopt these very, very anti-democratic decrees. And of course, then after they understood what I mentioned, that how to take advantage of this situation, also they started to enact certain decrees and laws that extended their ability to maneuver and weakened the opposition, or weakened local municipalities. And here again, one short brief thing for the context: we had local elections last autumn, and in many big cities and almost everywhere in the capital city, Budapest, the opposition got the majority and has now mayors that are coming from the opposition. we're going to have national elections in 2 years. So this is the time when the opposition can show that they have the ability and the capabilities to govern, and that they are ready to govern, let's say, the country as well in 2022 at the elections. And of course, Orban needs to prove that this is not the case. They're unable to govern, and what they do is just will be a catastrophe. They're unable to solve the crisis as well. And to achieve this, they need to weaken the municipalities and of course take away competences from almost everyone who could show that they have also successes, or they can prove that they are mastering the crisis or doing good things for the people. And just to tell you very few examples what was done. The government announced free parking in the country. Why? Because the local governments were getting the money from the parking fees. Again, a cut. They had an attempt to take even the decision rights of mayors and make it dependent on the approval of special task forces, local task forces, of course, appointed by the government. Then even Fidesz local government people said that's too much. You can't do this with us. So they withdrew from this. But you can see, what it is about. And one recent thing was that they even set up special administrative zones, they enabled the setting up of special administrative zones, which means that in these zones they have total control, and they can withdraw physically these zones from the spheres of the local governments. And they announced the first one, which is a huge Samsung factory. So from this moment on, the local government has absolutely no rights to influence, anything around the factory. Furthermore, the government takes all company income taxes, and which is of course a lot of money and a significant share. So besides all these measures, one thing regarding communication. So what you could see that after first, the Orban was rather putting certain second line people in the front when the whole crisis started. Let's see the Minister of Health or Human Resources, as it's called here. But now he took over control. His Facebook channel is and the government's Facebook channel is the main channel of communications. His videos are watched by 400,000 to 1 million people, depending on what it is about. And it's about, he's the only one who is able to solve this crisis, and these measures are used to save the country, and he's the only one who can do that. I will show you a few videos, just that you understand,
yeah, that would be great.
this type of propaganda. I guess I need to share my screen to do that.
In the meantime, I will, after Shantor will launch it, then we can also ask you a few questions.
Mm-hmm. Do you see that?
Yep, we see it. I see it.
Okay, so this is the Minister of Foreign Affairs. Just 1 second. This is also funny. They're coordinating how Hungarians from all around the world are going to be brought home. And you see, like in a film, they have a map with the places and like really doing a movie out of this mission. Then this is a video when, again, part of the propaganda that Chinese plane is bringing equipment with masks and ventilators and all kind of stuff, and Orban personally goes to the airport and accepts the shipment with the Chinese ambassador. It's part of this propaganda message that help comes from the East, while the European Union is not really helping us, and confirming Orban's foreign policy of opening towards the East, making friends with Turkish countries, with China, with Russia. And you see he's inspecting what was delivered by. Another video that was one of the most funniest, he's introducing the members of his task force or cabinet, like in an action film. And what you need to see is that, you know, everyone, you see the name of the person and what they're doing, and at the end, you know, Orban is coming, and he himself has no special role. He's just the prime minister, so the boss, and it's really like in an action movie.
Yeah,
And
it
finally,
familiar, unfortunately.
and you know, finally, to show a video when he was signing the decree when taking away the parking fees, he just announces that they made this decision. So please look at his his smile after the announcement.
Ingyenes a közterületi parkolás. Ezzel is a járvány elleni védekezés hatékonyságát segítjük.
And this smile went obviously to the opposition to show that, you know, we got you. And you know, I also want to show you one video which went a bit wrong, because he inspected a hospital, and people found out that, you know, not everything is working properly. He is talking to the director of the hospital, and you will see that, you know, Orban has a better facial masks than the director of the hospital, and you can see, you know, tiles falling from the floors in the background, a non-operating elevator in the background, and floors that, you know, are in a pretty poor condition. So that was a video where people really made memes of. But as said, and then really happy to answer questions.
Yeah. Yeah, we will. I would like to first launch a poll, because I would like to know where people are coming from. So we only had this maximum number of countries to vote from where we come. So let's see who will win it. And to know, we would be very curious during the discussion. If you have any comments about how's the situation in your country, please share it with us, both on here on Zoom or also on Facebook for the ones who are watching us there. And just to, we began with Orban, because he's like on the edge of becoming more of a dictatorship now that he runs through decrees. But we will continue with Fana, because I think he still has the crown for the most entertaining leader of a country until now. Orban didn't steal it from Lukashenko until now.
Yeah, I think Orban is still too far from Lukashenko. But first of all, thanks, Diana, for organizing this, and I'm really proud to be part of this great discussion and speakers. I also see very cool participants here, so I hope Matt Kwashiborski, Nikos Panagiotou, Spiridula, also I see Volga Rapinchuk from UK Embassy in Minsk will join our discussion later. Also, Yelena, my colleague from USAGM, please don't hesitate to raise your hand. There is in Zoom there is such option, just to give the signal that you want to speak and to share your thoughts. Because when we speak about Belarus, my motherland, on one hand it's very funny, but on the other hand it's also very sad what's going on here. In general, I think, you know, also just listening to what Shander is sharing, I think now it's the best time ever for dictators and for the empires. You know, they were waiting for dozens of years for this great moment. When the world is in catastrophe, when there is a global health and security disaster, the bad guys are coming to the public. And this is why, you know, I think we can expect not just economical crisis, but we can expect also political crisis for many, many years. And people like Lukashenko, Kim Jong-un, Bolsonaro, Turkmen President Berdimuhamedov, Orban, these people will come to the power in many, many, many other countries. Unfortunately, that's my pessimistic prediction. So let me share some thoughts and some pictures from Belarus, if you don't mind. Just to give
They're
you
always entertaining.
Yeah, I know it's not like super funny, of course, but first of all, we also have COVID. I know that many of you believe that Belarus is the best country in the world, but we still have COVID, and we are not super special people, and don't believe Lukashenko who says that no one died from COVID. So Belarusians are same people as others and same human beings. The only difference is that Belarusians are living for 25 years under dictatorship, and Belarusians got used to disasters, dramas, troubles, death, crisis, etc., etc. And but what's happening now? We see absolutely irrational behavior of Belarus leader. In the moment when Lukashenko can show himself as the real father of the nation, the president who unified the country, he really got the chance, to be the savior of the people. He took absolutely opposite irrational strategy. Instead of unifying people, helping, visiting hospitals, even doing similar things like Orban, recording the movies, Orban people, yeah, or like Putin, wearing all these scaphanders and visiting hospitals. Lukashenko self-isolated politically, informationally, socially, and he perceived the situation not as the crisis he must tackle, but as the competition. He wants to show that Belarus has a special way. This is why all these stupid statements happened, like ice hockey is killing virus, tractor is killing virus, butter is killing virus. That's everything to show that there is no panic, there is no crisis, and my stability, control, the system I have built, it's perfect. And crisis, health crisis, security crisis, political crisis doesn't have place to happen here. Of course, all his treatments plans, they don't work. And the most recent proof is that his teammate from ice hockey, a presidential ice hockey team, he was infected. So they played 1 week ago the same ice hockey championship, but the guy is in hospital right now. So Lukashenko is the contact of the first level. So all his populist statements, and I think populism rhetoric, that's another tool used by despots, dictators, authoritarian leaders in the world. And Bolsonaro is also a very great example from Brazil. Populist rhetoric like, we are strong people, and all the diseases, they are in your head. This populism, it helps you to win time, but it doesn't help you to win the virus. Also, he connected somehow the political agenda with the virus agenda. Before celebration of the Victory Day, May 9, he connected it somehow to the battle against the virus. He said, virus will not kill us because we won in the Second World War. I think that's a super talent to build, this global health crisis in his own political agenda. And instead of postponing the parade, military parade, with hundreds, thousands of people, he made it even bigger. And in 2 weeks, we can expect even more infected people in Belarus.
Do you have any idea about the number of cases, if they are real or not, in Belarus?
So officially, we have more than 7,000 people infected and more than 50 dead because of COVID. But the real number can be much, much higher. What they did, they perceived the virus as the opposition. They must crack down. And instead of opening and building transparent communication with the people, they harassed and threatened doctors. Only few brave doctors in hospitals and regions agreed to speak to journalists openly and to say and to speak about the situation that is really happening there. And that's a disaster for journalism as well, because journalism is suffering. The only source of information are insights sent by readers, viewers, and there is no way to prove or disapprove this information because governments say we don't know anything. It's like in the Chernobyl TV show. Situation is not great, not terrible. We have 7,000 infected, not great, not terrible. But what's interesting, they hosted the delegation of a World Health Organization last week, and during the visit of this delegation, the numbers were given to the population. So during these 3 days of super freedom and pluralism, the real numbers were presented every day, the same as in Hungary, in Romania, in Poland, Lithuania. But after delegation left Belarus, everything came back. And instead of giving number of infected cases, they say, we have 5,000 in the hospital, 300 dismissed, we checked 60,000, but there is no answer how many people were infected. And when this World Health Organization, they shared their recommendations to Belarus, all state TV channels misinterpreted this recommendation. And instead of saying that World Health Organization asked us to postpone gatherings, they chose only one. Dr. O'Connor from World Health Organization thanked Belarus authorities for tackling the problem. So this was only one phrase they chose from the document. And government continues to prepare parade for Victory Day. They prepare Subotnik. It's a communist era community work day. I don't know if Ceausescu organized something like this.
Yeah, we had in August. It's fine. We had it. You don't have anything new for us.
I think you're familiar, you see.
Yeah, after so many years of communism.
And of course, football. And I think football is something which made Belarusian football team the most popular in the world. We still have actual professional national tournament happening, and all the former fans of Real Madrid and Barcelona now cheer in Belarusian regional provincial teams. But the problem is that people who attend these matches, they don't keep social distancing. Finishing my introduction to Belarus, actually people in this situation are given the choice. Or they agrees with the status quo, they accept reality given by TV channels and Lukashenko, that nothing is happening, that virus is conspiracy, that it's a psychosis, and COVID doesn't kill anyone, or they take steps, they do something, they self-organize, and they protect themselves and their societies. And unfortunately, it's very difficult to build, this second type of reaction in the country where civil society were suppressed for so many years. It's very difficult to build civil society in the country where people are afraid of creating organizations, building campaigns, even crowdfunding. And that's a big test for the people and for the civil society, the test of maturity. I will finish on this, and I think we can discuss.
Yeah, we'd like to launch a second question in our short poll about how do you feel in your own countries that the crisis is managed, and also for the two of you to tell me, we've seen the government and what the government is doing, but how do the people feel in this period? How do they react? Do they take care, for example, in Belarus more? In Romania, compared to Hungary and to Belarus, the rules are pretty strict right now. So you can only go out if you have a form completed and only for certain emergencies or going to work or something like that. So we're pretty strict, but in Hungary is more relaxed, and in Belarus is probably the most relaxed atmosphere in the world in this crisis. So,
but it's not relaxed. I don't speak. There is a hidden
from the
panic.
government, yeah, from the government's
from the
point
government.
of view. But from the people's point of view, what do you think? How do they feel about this in Hungary? How do they feel, Sándor? You have to turn on the sound.
Yeah, probably it depends on whom you ask, because the virus affects, of course, different spheres of the society very differently. Let's say people who have kids, they have a hard time since schools are closed. So they have to imagine, let's say, a family where the parents still go to work. They need to solve the situation of, who takes care of the kids, why it's really not recommended to give them to the grandparents because of the risk of infection. For those people who, let's say, worked in the tourism industry or other industries that are now facing a huge crisis, they probably lost their job, and the government is really not doing a lot to give direct help to these people. So what you can see in the economic measures of this government, that they of course try to keep big business alive as much they can, while they absolutely refrain from doing this direct cash transfers to citizens to keep, let's say, consumption alive, and save people's life where they would end up in poverty or lose their flats or whatever. So I think socially they're doing very poorly, and of course those who are affected, they're not really happy about that. But as said, the limitations of personal freedom are not that hard. So in this regard, I think it's more a question of either your health or your social existence. And in terms of health, what you can read from the news is that in terms of coordinations, there is a lot of chaos reported, that, to get tested is really an issue. Hungary is among the countries that does the lowest amount of tests. While people really appreciate the hard work of doctors and nurses and say that, there are many reports that once they're in a hospital, the personnel is professional and kind and tries to help, but the system has huge flaws. And of course, this is how a so centralized system is, of course, unable to respond to such a crisis in a quick manner, because everyone is afraid of punishment for a wrong decision or not complying with the expectations of the government. So you can see traces of this very centralized way, an authoritarian way of governing in how life looks like. But in a nutshell, I think I would emphasize these things.
Yeah, as we can see from the poll, people are pretty satisfied with the governments, their own governments, and how they're dealing with this crisis. I think we all have a higher level of tolerance during this period to what the government is doing, no matter what, except for extreme cases. But we tend to give them more chances because we understand that it's a higher purpose behind this. But the idea is that after we will go out of this isolation or quarantine, we will go out and the economic crisis will somehow hit us in one way or another, and the leaders will have to deal with that. So as if Franak said that this current situation of global emergency is good for them, the economic crisis can hit any leader pretty bad. So if it hurts your wallet, then you tend to not be so tolerant anymore. So you said, Franak, that in Belarus people take care of themselves even if the state doesn't ask them to.
Yeah. Actually, I think the situation it catalyzed the processes of people's self-organization. So we can see that IT companies, they crowdfunded and they presented 700,000 masks for hospitals in the regions. The Facebook group, which helped political prisoners 10 years ago, now is gathering money and support to regional polyclinics and hospitals. and they gave more money than the government. So government invested only like few millions dollars into fighting COVID, and people already gathered, same money and even more to fight COVID. So basically, society didn't rely on the government anymore, and I think this will influence the attitude to Lukashenko. So it destroyed already the perception of the president as the person who is in charge of everything. Diana, I wanted to invite here Matt Kwasiborski. He just raised the hand. Matt is from the Fund of American Studies and good friend of mine. Matt, how are you?
Hi, Franek. Doing as best we can. I thought I would, first of all, thank you and Diana for hosting this wonderful symposium online. It's great to hear because as we are becoming more into our own nations with the news, we're losing some of the international perspective. So thank you, and thank you for your videos on Belarus and what's happening. I'll speak mostly from a local standpoint. I'm here in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, my hometown. And talking about what's happening in the United States, the states are starting to form their own rules. In the state of Pennsylvania, for example, we now have to go into shops with masks on. That was just mandated on Sunday night. Before that, we could go into shops without it. The second thing is that I've noticed when I go out, either riding my bike or going for a walk, people are staying in their own clusters. For example, like maybe the people they live with or that, so they'll go to parks in clusters to where you'll see them 3 or 4 or 5 people here, and then maybe 2 or 3 meters away, there's the next cluster and the next cluster, which is quite interesting to me. The fact that they think they're practicing this social distancing, but they may or may not be. If you do not wear a mask when you're out in the streets, you get sometimes dirty looks about that. Most of all, people are staying at home. My aunt is starting to become very skeptical. She's starting to understand why can't her children come over to the house, her grown sons, come over to the house and visit. Why can't we have birthday parties or celebrations, even if it's just for a short amount of time? And I think you start to see that kind of breaking down of the belief that maybe this is a conspiracy, that maybe there is something behind this. We don't want to tell them it's because they're older. We don't want to expose them. And then finally, my cousin, one of her sons has started a business, a vareniki or pierogi business before the COVID-19. And his delivery service is really exploding. So I will go out and help him do deliveries, but when we come back, we sort of disinfect as much as possible. But we also know that we could be bringing the disease into the house. I don't go out all the time, just when he needs help. And then finally, I think the states are different. As I said, the state of Georgia, the governor there wants to start opening up barbershops, be able to get tattoos, wants to go bowling and movie theaters. And there's no sense of directive from a federal government. And I think that's because we're such a big nation. I don't know if the governor of Georgia will go through with these orders, if they will actually open up, but you start to see people needing to get back to work and getting back to a sense of life. So it's really kind of interesting times here in the United States in those perspectives. So that's all the comments that I have. Thank you, Franek, for letting me contribute to this wonderful panel.
Thank you so much, Matt, for the comments. It's interesting to see how we are dealing with the same problem all over the world, but we are reacting in different ways. But basically, what you said, Matt, I can find the people around you. I can find them also in the people around me. The aunt who doesn't understand, the neighbor who does believe in conspiracy theories, and I think it's a matter of patience and trying to understand that this will take a while, and this will be a situation who will take like 1 year, 1.5 years, who knows how long it will take, and how it will reshape how we react and how we react to other people. So I would also like to launch you another intriguing questions to see how do you think which type of state do you think manages this the best, democracy or authoritarian regimes?
Because that's a very good question, because I must say, without answering, I must say that in the beginning I was changing my opinion on this question many times. Because this is exactly the case where centralized system of managing the society and the country must be much more efficient. For example, the Wuhan administration, the first weeks of the outbreak, it did actually a great job. They isolate people in 2 weeks. The spread was in decline, at least officially. We don't know the real information.
Yeah.
That's true as well. But they when you are not limited, when you control all your smartphones, WeChats, all the information, when you know who moves, who goes where, it's very easy to control the society and to stop the outbreak. But after the situation happened in other countries, non-free countries, not only in China, I realized that perhaps authoritarianism, in theory, can be better in managing, but the problem is in motivation. What is their real motivation? To save the people or to save their, I'm sorry, ass? And that's the biggest difference, because for democracies, perhaps they are not ideal in tackling this problem. They cannot take and close your windows and doors and everything. They cannot, like technically, politically, they cannot. But their interest is to save people, because the life of the individual and the health of individual is #1 priority. In authoritarianism, especially communist-like states, the collective interest is something very abstract and something very different. And it doesn't correlate with the interest of the individual, not always.
Yeah, definitely.
I think what you can see that for cases where there is, let's say, a decision and you have to get it through quickly, the authoritarian way can be more efficient. When it is about feedback or doing things quickly, and you don't have the autonomous institutions and people who exactly know what to do on the ground and how to react, then you lose time and you lose capacities by waiting for the central organ telling you what to do. And often, depending on the spheres of life, you need to take different decisions, and you just simply you're unable to know from the central perspective. So if you even don't put any democratic ideas behind it, just simply efficiency, you don't, partly one of the solutions can work and the other not. And just echoing what Franak said about the society taking care about things that are not done by the government. We had also examples of people starting to do their own masks, and communities organizing around helping elderly people, or people giving out their free flats that they use to Airbnb to doctors who need to self-isolate and cannot go home to their families. So there were many very touching instances where the society was much quicker in responding to certain needs than the government.
Yeah, Marina also pointed here in the chat that maybe this passive approach of the governments in some countries would give the activists a chance to fill the vacuum. It's the same here in Romania. The activists have raised like millions of euros to support the system, the medical system, and the target groups, the risk groups. And it is a two-sided blade, let's say. It's on one point we could end up with less rights, but on the other part we could learn more to come together as communities and to learn to organize ourselves, and to learn that even if the situation is this bad, we can do and change things. And this could be a lesson learned from all this chaos right now. And I have to say that in support of the democratic countries who are reacting better, in my opinion, definitely to this crisis, is that we have sort of, first of all, we have sort of a trade-off. We have a deal. We don't make a fuss about losing our rights for 2 months or 2 months and a half or stuff like that. But then we want you to act well as a government, and we want our freedoms back. We want our rights back after this ends. And the second of all is that people have reacted in democratic countries much better than I would have expected. I mean, in Romania as well, we have a compliancy level in my area of 85%. So 85% of the people are respecting the rules. So this is a very high percentage for people who are pretty attached to families, and we've passed through Easter, a very important holiday here. So we should give people more credit than we do. I think this is a lesson for me as well. They react better than we suppose. For example, like you said, Franak, in Belarus, the people take care of themselves, even if the government doesn't tell them to. So, but the point is that we have to see what will go out, how this will roll after after the end of this isolation period? Because that's the critical part. And I want to ask you, what will the trade-off be? What do you think will not return? Because we know from the history that when a state, no matter what state it is, takes you some rights, some of them will not return. They always tend to keep like 1% of the rights they take away, they will keep, and not as a state being a mean entity, but because, for example, in the next, I don't know, 12, 18 months, probably they will need to use the surveillance capacity of the telecommunication companies to just to maintain the pandemic under control. So this could remain, but it wouldn't be imaginable like 6 months ago to just give it away for free. So my question to you is, what do you think will stay, and for what should we fight more to gain back? Freedom of the press for me is like the first thing to do, to make sure that the watchdogs, the press has freedom to say whatever they want to say. What would it be for you?
So that's the question to the audience, to Shandor,
to the
me?
audience and to you. Yeah, you can start if you have ideas.
So my personal feeling, like the world is changing now forever. So a few weeks ago, we had to order the survey in the marketing company here, and they asked us, guys, and do you really want to make the survey, because people are dying and everything, and perhaps let's wait until the normality. But but we answered, yes, we want to know these results and and social opinion right now, because normality will never be back. Normality as we knew, like normality 1 year ago, it will never happen again. So the situation today is the process to the new normality, which will perhaps be stabilized in 1 year or 5 years. But I think the perception of the societal values, perception of elections, perception of the role of the government, civil society, the form of civil society organizations, the crowdfunding, the freedom of speech, including freedom of movement, will be revised, where the quarantine must limit your freedoms and where it shouldn't limit your freedoms. All these issues, that were existing before, since United Nations declarations of human rights, they will be not revised fully, reshaped somehow, but also rethought, because we never, since 40s, 50s, we never faced such a situation. That's a very new situation, a new reality. And for democracy, it's very important to be modern, open-minded, and flexible right now, because democracies will also be rebuilding their systems, their models, their mechanism of tackling such crises. Because China actually used this COVID same way as the global powers using wars. Why wars are happening? Because bad guys, are fighting good guys. But also wars are happening because arms producers want to test, the arms, wants to learn, to teach, to train their soldiers, their armies. What China has done, China used the COVID to test all this high-tech know-hows they were developing for years. What they tried? They tried positioning technologies. They tried drones to deliver food. They tried robots to contactless communication. They tried satellite monitoring of people who are infected. They tried, what else? Health sensors. Now, when you go to the shop in China, they measure your temperature and take your biometrics. So before they took your fingerprint only when you enter the public space, now they measure all your health situation when you enter any public place. Big data and data recognition. So they managed to test thousands of technologies to make Chinese system even more powerful. Democracies actually didn't use this opportunity, unfortunately. And I have a big concern that after COVID will step down and we will be able to come back to normality step by step. Technologically, democracies will be much weaker than authoritarianisms like China that use this time to develop their digital and technological strength.
Okay, so you're the pessimist of the group now, okay? You're bringing us the bad side of the future, but it's definitely something which is on
Did you
all
watch
of our minds.
Terminator, Diana?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, that's the future, you know.
We are all thinking about how bad things could go, but we could also put some hope in there, maybe. I don't know. Maybe we'll learn something. Everybody's saying that democracies need a cold shower and get up and fight more. But could you tell us a few words, Frana, because I know you're following this about what's happening in Russia. Because, for example, what we do here in the civic NGO department these days, most of our times it's fighting propaganda and disinformation, which is pushed from that area also in Romania. So what are they doing? Because they, in the beginning, they were like bravely fighting the pandemia, and now they just disappeared, and everybody saw lines of emergency cars in hospitals, and there are rumors that they are also overwhelmed.
Yes, I can share. Oh, it's not this guy. Sorry. That's
not
yeah,
your guy.
Yeah, about Russia. So at the USAGM, you know, when we discussed, you know, what Russia is trying to do during COVID, I would explain it like in 2 words. They are trying to build capacity in terms of vertical power vertical, in building power vertical, and in terms of controlling the informational flows. Russia is huge, and Russia never has built such system of citizens control as China. But what they do right now, besides, you know, making Putin the Tsar forever, the leader who will never be changeable, they also accepted the number of laws. It's like dozens of laws inside, and some of them are laws supposed to limit freedom of speech. For example, on one hand, you know, they penalize quarantine violators, but on the other hand, the same law writes about penalizing disinformation distributor about the pandemic and about the health. For example, Russia provided examples what kind of information will be treated as disinformation, as fake news. And one of them was comment by user on VK, Russian social network VK, saying that, oh, Putin is hiding the real numbers of COVID infected. So, you know, even disinformation and fake news can be identified very differently in different realities. And Russian reality now is a dictatorial reality. Basically, they want to use this moment when everyone is scared, when everything is chaotic, just to build the authoritarian control over information flows. And state of emergency law, they are going to accept in the nearest future. It will allow government to introduce state of emergency because of any reason. For example, now many countries introduce state of emergency, but the citizens didn't feel the state of emergency. You know, we actually discussed with Diana, yes? But in some countries, formally, it's still state of emergency. But for Russia, state of emergency, it will mean that the administration, that Putin, Kremlin, has enormous unlimited power. And if the West will not pay attention right now to this dramatic development in Russia, it will be too late. It will be another China, when we will have the parallel reality and we will not have any influence and any chance to change it.
As we heard about Russia, as the entire Europe was going into lockdown, from Russia we received the news that Putin changed the law so he can be president until 2036, I think. So I was just, it was funny because in these times, nobody makes plans, not even for 6 months from now, but he's making plans for like 16 years. So he's a good planner. You also have someone who is asking you, Franak, would we want, Elena is asking you, would we want democracies to be adopting, testing, developing these surveillance technologies?
Gosh, Elena, it's a provocative question. The problem, that everyone is tempted. Believe me, that even democratic governments and politicians.
It's like the forbidden fruit.
It's a forbidden fruit because everyone believes, that having people tracked with their smartphones, that can be useful for the state because it will mean more security, it will mean police will be more efficient. But there is another side. When after these democratic politicians, another government will come, it doesn't mean they will see this access to personal data and control over people movements in the same way. So I think there is a huge flow of experts from China of these surveillance technologies, and you, Elena, know it perfectly. But what we have to do, we have to make all these governments that are buying the satellites, the software for controlling and tracking infected people, we have to make it transparent. We, especially journalists, we must make sure the citizens are aware of all steps that government is adopting right now in order to prevent disease distribution, but in fact that can be used for suppressing the freedom.
Okay, so I will, in this tone, I would like to launch the last question of our poll, which is about how do we see the future? So do we see it better or better world? There are so many possibilities. I only added 2, so it will be a tough choice. 3, sorry. But we would also like your opinions in comments, or if you want to intervene about how do we see the world. We've learned about the bad stuff that could happen, the bad turns which could happen, and are real risk. But also, I'm always saying that it's a matter of our personal decisions, how to put a stop to this, because dictators cannot just happen overnight. Leaders cannot just be put there. They are the result of our involvement or not uninvolvement in our communities and in our societies. They are a reflection of how we are as citizens, active or not. And also I would also like to ask you, how do you see the elections in the future? Because we have a lot of countries with elections this year. In Romania, they are already postponing the local elections because you can't keep them in these conditions. They will take place in the fall. In the same time, probably, or maybe a week apart from the parliamentary elections, which are very important as well. So we can't even imagine how will that take place. This democratic process will take place in these conditions. And also, Sándor mentioned that in Hungary, they will have in 2 years. So it will have more time to deal with the economic crisis to prepare for the elections. But in Belarus also, Franak said that you said that you have elections in fall, right? Presidential elections. So yes. How do you think this will happen? I mean, I can't imagine how campaigns will go on. You can't just all make them on Facebook or on Zoom. The candidates can't campaign on Zoom, or could they?
But as you can see in the States also there is a campaign, and they managed somehow to move it to virtual platforms. And I think social media platforms are happy because there are so much fun, so much money, so much traction and attention of users. So it's possible to make virtual campaigns. But I think this campaigning will need new specialists. All the theories of the traditional political campaigns, since 90s, they are irrelevant right now. So I think the new professionals with a knowledge both of politics and the digital will be needed more and more. So I think the best thing you can invest right now it's the digital, because the world of the future, politics of the future, everything will be happening on digital platforms. And I think many companies actually after this remote work period, they will never come back to the office work. I think many IT companies in Minsk actually, they really did like working remotely.
Yeah. I think we all found a bit welcoming to work offline, to work only online and not offline. But I'm pro direct contact, so I think this you can't take from people. You can replace it for a while, but I think we have a need of connecting also in the presence of each other. So we seem that we have 50% of the people now less optimistic, let's say, who see the world of tomorrow less democratic one with less freedom. But we have the same percentage of people who see the world a better one or the same as before. So if we start from the idea, from the presumption that the one before was good enough, we can say that we are half optimistic, half pessimistic. The glass is half full, half empty until now. It will depend probably mostly on how the economic crisis will hit us, because I feel that we are kind of suspended in a bubble now. We haven't hit the ground. We are just making assumptions and we imagine how the future will look, but nobody has touched the ground until now to see how the reality is. And I would like to also ask you for a few final thoughts about what we could do as civic activists or people involved in communities, in societies to make it better, what we could do, what should we do during the next period to make sure that things will not go that bad. And whoever wants to start is free to start.
Shander.
Okay.
You be the optimist today.
I'm not that optimistic, unfortunately, but I would say this is also a great opportunity to, rethink how our world, or at least, Europe operated and our countries operated, and what, the meaning of communities is. And I think that for us as civil society and people who work for empowering and improving local communities, it is a great chance to show to others that it makes sense to build communities, work in communities, to self-organize, that local municipalities have to be strengthened and so on. So I think it can give us great experiences and also prove that it makes sense to not to wait always for the government that it solves our problems, but try to, step up for our rights and work together in solving problems. On the other hand, what was said, this is a great opportunity for dictators and those who want to expand their powers even further, and then not give up their special and extra powers after the crisis is over. So the threat is there, and I think it will really depend on economy, on individual, countries and let's say leaders' faith, what of these tendencies will be stronger, and of course how long this whole story will last, because we simply don't know how this will or could end. We've seen that it might, the pandemic sometimes goes back, you can ease restrictions, but then it may come back. So I think it's going to be a long story, and it's really open-ended, and I'm hoping, of course, of us becoming more resilient and better in organizing in our communities, and also understand what was wrong with the world before and how we can improve it for the future.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Andor, for this great motivational speech after the doom-like vision we had before. So, Fradak, what do you think we should do besides going online and
again, don't think I'm pessimist. I'm super optimist, but we just have to be flexible, because why democracy is winning? Because most of democracies and democratic leaders, they are not so fast enough, quick enough, flexible enough as dictators. When, for example, let's say United States, they support the stability in the whole world. They provide food to Africa, health support to Southeast Asia. And what does authoritarian regime in Russia is doing? They invest in military, they make cyber attacks, they launch trolls against the American elections. And when, let's say, Western democracies, they try to support the peace, the bad guys, they are trying to have even smaller resources to do everything to disrupt the peace. And now they have the perfect soil for disruptive. How to prevent it? What to do? First of all, to be more flexible and creative. So in Belarus, for example, the situation with COVID, it sparked the creativity of people. Dozens of movies, cartoons, pictures were created about Lukashenko and about the situation. People really found the power to make jokes of this. For example, for many years, we didn't have any protest, and suddenly graffiti was seen in Minsk. People wearing masks with the text, "Haha, I will die here." So it's like a joking, that's my favorite country. I will die here, but I still like it. So making memes about Lukashenko, people are afraid of Lukashenko and making jokes about him. You can be punished, you can be jailed for this. But now it's another round, of this people, societal, political mobilization. So this joke says that I have this virus for 25 years already. The movie, this how it's in original.
Yeah, I know that. I can't remember the name, but I know the one with Leonardo DiCaprio, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yes,
That's DiCaprio's version,
yeah.
of Lukashenko. So, he was the only one who will survive. Stickers for Telegram, and for messengers, for WhatsApp. That's everything, which was spiked by the virus. So we have to support this wave, this flow, this mood, even in time of crisis. We have to stay optimistic and positive. And in the bigger picture, on the biggest level, I see that after the COVID will finish and the crisis will begin, political economical crisis, there will be a competition between technocrats and populists. So populists will promise better future and will say who was guilty in virus, and will promise, the simple solution, like it happened in Germany when Hitler came to power. It was crisis. America was too poor. The support was minimized. The support of Europe was minimized, and the Hitler happened. So this type of populist will show up in basically each region, each country. But there will be another group of like liberal technocrats who will be serving, not presenting ideas or vision, but just serving, the societies. This type of leaders appear now in democratic states and semi-democratic states who try to organize societies to tackle the virus when the government is not able to do this. And this type of leaders, will represent this liberal democracy in the future. So let's support the second group. Let's support the second group, and let's try to diminish the influence and the impact of populism. And definitely, let's not repeat the situation that happened to Europe in 30s.
Yeah, well, Israel has shown us these days that you can still protest in a pandemic. So we have a model now. If you feel like the governments are not doing their jobs properly, we can protest at the social distance, an acceptable 2 meters, or how they protested in Jerusalem, I think, last days. But the idea is that it's up to us. I think this is what I'm fighting for a few years now with the NGO I'm representing, and this is also my idea in general, that we shouldn't put all the blame on the governments, because they are elected, they are our representatives, and we have to make our voices heard. And Franak, people told us the name, it's Revenant, so we know the movie now. And if you would like to add something else in the end, the floor is yours. We have someone here who wants to say. Franak, can you give him the voice?
Yes. Avdil Gashi.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, cool. First of all, so I'm Abdul Gashi from Pristina, Kosovo. And I'm civil activist here in Kosovo. So I just, first of all, wanted to thank you for organizing this very productive conference, because I really liked it, and there was like some very productive information shared. I just decided to talk, to share the experience that Kosovo had recently. And it was an interesting one because, so just a little background information. Prior to elections, and like in the last couple of years, we had this opposition party, Vendosia, which was very active in fighting corruption and this negative phenomena in the government. And on 6th of October, finally, it won and it created the government and started actually keeping their promises on fighting the corruption. But there was an interesting thing, because one of the promises they made was that they will impose a reciprocity as a mass towards Serbia and drop the 100% tax that we have put in. But this wasn't in the interest of Americas, because it seems like Trump administration wants to get done with this dialogue thing. And prior to this COVID-19 happening in Kosovo and like in the Balkans generally, America in a diplomatic way started putting pressure and even threatening to cut the relations with Kosovo in the sense of the support and all that. And this endangerment of relations between Kosovo and the US created a perfect opportunity for the parties that have lost elections, because of course they really didn't want this party to continue governing, because it was basically literally fighting the corruption and fighting their positions in fighting their pockets. So they filed a motion of no trust and dropped this government from the functioning in the parliament. So what happened after that was that within this impact, or like the of foreign policy that America has towards EU, and especially in this matter of dialogue between Kosovo and Serbia, it created a total mess in the country, because not only people were raged with this file of like with the dropping of the government, but also the government was limited in their decisions that they can make. So for regard,
just to briefly interrupt you, we have to also wrap up because we've extended our time for like 20 minutes now. Just a final thought,
yeah,
if you think.
I was about to finish.
Okay. Just a final thought, if you want to share with us about how do you think this will affect in general, and then we have to really close the discussion.
Yeah, that was what I was. That was where I. Sorry, that was where I come. Where I was coming, because like with the dropping of the government and this influence from foreign policy within the country, it created so many problems, because the people really didn't want this government to go, and they started protesting on the balconies with different hitting kitchen equipment and stuff like that. But also it created a mess in the government, because they couldn't really impose they cannot create now a new law that will manage the situation. So they are very limited in this aspect. So I think Kosovo makes a really nice story in the terms of foreign policy influence in the country, in the terms of and how that will be used from the opposition parties, and how it affects also this COVID-19 management of the situation. And also we have these problems in the sense of civil society activism, because now the government, like the opposition parties, want to create a new government, but the ways how we can protest are very limited. And it's very interesting how the situation will evolve in the future.
Definitely,
so I could come from different countries, but I just wanted to share this experience.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you
for joining us. I could talk about this subject for a lot of hours, but we all have other things to do and jobs to finish. Unfortunately, I'm very passionate about telling people to get involved and to make their voices heard and to change this world for the better, because it's not only up to government and bad forces, evil forces who govern us. It's just about us. So in order to end this, and thank you so much for joining us, this video will also be available on YouTube on the DCNC Hub, I think, channel, and on Facebook. It's already available. Please join other events from this series. Tomorrow at 8 a.m. Washington, DC time. We have distance learning during lockdowns and social distancing. So this is a very interesting subject, as long as for most of the world for the next 3 weeks we'll be still in lockdown and we still have to go through the educational process. Thank you once again, Shandor. Thank you, Franak, for joining me in the discussion. Thank you all who showed up and talked to us. It's very nice to see that people are interested about this subject. It's not the most comfortable one, but it's one we should talk about more often, especially during the next few weeks and months. Thank you. Have a good day, good evening. Stay safe. Stay at home. Wear masks. Wear gloves. Wear whatever it makes you safe. Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.